You may have realized that being healthy feels different than it did in the past now that you're over 50. If you want to maximize your health potential but don't have time to read through overwhelming pages of Google links, this is the show for you. Welcome to Healthy Tips After 50. We love doing the research, finding solutions, talking to health experts, and learning what works and what doesn't. Now, your host. She spent the last 25 years dedicated to feeling her best and is here to share her best findings with you, Susan Rosen.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen. And today, my guest is Dr. Nathan Price. And Dr. Price, I'm going to call you Nathan. I hope you don't mind.
Please do.
And he is the Chief Scientific Officer of Thorne Health, which he will tell us about. And he's written a new book, it looks like. And he has some very good, getting a blank mind again. Okay. Where he went to school and those kinds of things. I just totally lost it. At University of California, San Diego.
Yep.
And then Brigham Young. And your degrees are kind of interesting as well to end up in aging and that whole area. So welcome, Nathan, and tell us a little bit more about yourself and fill in some of the holes and places where I left.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to do that. So, as was mentioned, so I did a Ph.D. in bioengineering at UC San Diego, and I went from there, got a faculty position at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign in chemical engineering and at the Institute for Genomic Biology. Actually deferred that. I got that position straight out of grad school, but I deferred it for 2 years to go do a postdoc with Lee Hood, who I ended up writing the book with. This was many years ago. And at the Institute for Systems Biology. So I became very interested in personalized medicine at that time. I then became an assistant professor at the University of Illinois, was there for 4 years. All the time, Lee and I stayed in close contact, and then he just kept reaching out and eventually recruited me back to ISB as an associate professor. I then became associate director of the Institute, worked with Lee closely for a number of years. We co-founded a company together called Aerovale, which was one of the first big scientific wellness company. We did that for about 5 years. It led to a ton of incredible science, but financially, the company ended up not making it, so it folded. But it led to a lot of other things. So then Lee and I did a lot of work in scientific wellness, which is what we'll talk about at some point. And we wrote this book together from Harvard Press that just came out called The Age of Scientific Wellness, Why the Future of Medicine is Personalized, Predictive, Data-Rich, and in Your Hands. And we can go through that. And so Lee, and for listeners that don't know, Lee Hood is a very famous scientist. He was the inventor of the automated DNA sequencer that made the Human Genome Project possible. He won the National Medal of Science from President Obama and a million other things. And so we did that together, and we actually merged our lab groups together about 5 or 6 years ago and ran a joint enterprise for a while. And then a couple years ago, I was contacted by Paul Jacobson, the CEO of Thorne, who had seen all this work that we've done, and we'll talk a little more about that, and basically convinced me to shift my career, which I did jumping out of academia, where I maintained an on-leave appointment at ISB, but I have moved full-time now to New York and working on the new company, which is Thorne HealthTech, or the new to me, I should say, Thorne HealthTech.
Okay.
So I had moved to become CEO of this startup company called Longevity. We then merged Longevity and Thorne Research together to form Thorne HealthTech. We IPO'd that on the NASDAQ about a year and a half ago or so.
Wow.
And so now that's brought me to my current position, which is as Chief Scientific Officer of Thorne HealthTech. Anyway, that's too much information, but there you go. There's my background in a nutshell.
Well, you've had a busy, interesting life. That's great. Yeah, sounds like you done a lot of good work.
It's been fun. Yeah, I would say the big animating push that I've been most interested in over the last decade has been this area that we call scientific wellness. And Thorne HealthTech itself is a company that is dedicated to scientific wellness as an enterprise. And what we mean by that is to be able to take detailed measurements from a person. So Lee and I had led, I think, the largest studies of deep multi-omics measurements. So these are just measuring thousands of different variables out of your blood and your stool and saliva and all of these kind of pieces to generate really deep information about what you can do in your health. And then at Thorne, what we do is we take that information and we have a gut health test, we have a biological aging test, so we have various tests to get access to this kind of information. Then we use AI to analyze that information and provide personalized recommendations to people. So what can you actually do that would make a difference? And we can get, and in some places in particular, we can get incredibly granular about that. And then the third piece is to be able to provide solutions to people. So these can be, lifestyle recommendations, and they can also relate to Thorne's core business around nutritional supplements and things like this. So Thorne has now expanded up to about an 800,000 square foot facility in South Carolina. And so we make about 300 different products, and they're controlled all the way from the plants in the ground to the end. There's 4 rounds of testing in every one of them. They're used by 47,000 healthcare practitioners and about 5 million customers. So we have a big enterprise that's going with a great reputation on the quality side. And so my coming into that was really about bringing testing AI together with product solutions in ways that we can monitor and improve health, and really looking to be a preventive health company.
Okay. Interesting. So do you, in all of these supplements and the health areas that you guys are working in, is it like a really broad line, or are there particular kinds that you do more of or concentrate on?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Thorne came, in the early days of Thorne, it was totally focused on as a health practitioner business. So we've really done a lot where we've been selling to doctors. In fact, most of our customers initially found out about us from their physician. So that's been historically how that's happened. In recent times, we've really started to focus primarily as a healthy aging company. And so, campaigns that we're doing right now are really around healthy aging. And so with the broad portfolio, so in the science realm, we always talk about the hallmarks of aging. There's a number of hallmarks of aging that you look at, DNA stability, which involves things like telomere lengths, but also the ability to do DNA repair. You might look at senescent cells. You might look at metabolic capacity, all kinds of features like that. And so one of the things is because we have such a broad portfolio, we're able to hit a lot of those mechanisms around the hallmarks of aging. And it's one of the ways that, at least internally, we focus a lot of what we're doing around, all right, well, which hallmarks of aging can we hit? And if we can't hit them, then what might we do from a discovery potential to find out ways that we can add that into the portfolio? So we try to be a company that can help people as they try to have a long, healthy life at whatever stage they're at. So that's really how it's focused.
Okay. And so is it mostly through doctors, or is it in some of the I hate to call them health stores, but there's different places that
So we're mostly not in stores, and we do that for a variety of reasons. So the two big channels we have is either through doctors or other healthcare practitioners, where we sit in the office or something like that, And then the
Right.
other way that's actually been growing like crazy over the last few years has been our online direct to consumer. So at
Oh, okay.
Thorne.com, and people also will buy it through Amazon or things like that.
Okay.
One of the reasons we like it when people come to Thorne.com and why we haven't put it in a store is because the online experience lets us do a lot more education around what are your health needs, what might be useful to them, what not. So they get that.
Right.
If they're working with a provider, then they get that. And if they come online, then they get a version of that, especially if they do testing. And we have a set of questionnaires, and we have tests, and so if someone wants to say try to improve their aging, they could take. We've got a biological age test. It's based on 40 different clinical labs, and we do it based on these clinical lab tests rather than, for example, epigenetics or something like that, because the clinical labs, one, are the most predictive for health outcomes in the future. So they tell you they're the strongest for that. And the second is because they're well understood, we can map different signals into different processes in your body, whether it relates to metabolic health or liver health or heart health or whatever it is. And then you can get personalized recommendations for things that you can do to improve on. You can then retest. Did you in fact get the benefit that you were hoping for and that we were aiming for? And see if that in fact reduced the biological age on the next test. And so those are the kind of things that people can do. And Thorne.com is it's not a prescriptive type path that everyone takes. Everyone can take their own individual journey, but we make those available for individuals to go through.
Interesting. Okay. And who is it that you're finding is coming in and using your line?
Yeah, so we have a very broad set of people who have come through and done this. We've had 5 million customers so far.
Wow.
So there's a lot, and it really runs the gamut. So one thing that Thorne is really well known for is our work with athletes. So we're in the locker room of essentially every professional sports team in the country and a number overseas. We're the only company that the UFC allows into their ultra performance centers because they had doping and some things like that in the past, and so they trust Thorne, so we're the only ones allowed in there. We have the only A+ rating from the regulatory body in Australia of any supplement company. The reason I bring that up is because in Australia they regulate supplement companies as pharmaceutical companies, so you have to go through not just the quality controls that you do here, but you actually have to show efficacy trials and all of those things. And we're the only company that has gotten that rating. So those are all pieces that matter. So we have a high-end sports business that comes in, and then we have a lot of people that come in that just want to focus on their health. A lot of times they're triggered because they have some issue. For example, our gut health test, which is a microbiome test. Some people do it because they're just biohackers and they like to get information. But a lot of people will do it because they're having some issue with their gut, constipation or diarrhea or irritable bowel syndrome or whatever it is. And so a lot of people will come in because they have an issue or a problem. And so there's all kinds of questionnaires and things on Thorne.com where people can click in and just say, here's my issue. This is what I'm looking for. And then they can find something and they can research it. And we also have articles that go through, a whole variety of health information. And then we also cite back to the original scientific literature. So if you want to go back and find, okay, well, why do we believe that this, compound is important for this condition? We keep quite extensive libraries of that kind of information. And so people can dive in and depending on how they're at, they can just, trust and go, or they can dive in and read a whole bunch of papers and validate them. They're sophisticated that way. So there's all kinds of things that they can do.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds like one of those places I would probably be on for like 5 days. My husband would have to come find me or something.
I love it and all that stuff too.
Yeah, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this podcast, believe me.
Of course.
So, well, that's really interesting. I know I've come across Thorne. I was just looking, but you guys don't. No, that's something else. Okay, I could have sworn at some point I did get something from you guys, but I don't know. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah, could very well be. And one of the other things we've really focused a lot on at Thorne, especially on the testing side, is we're trying to make the testing as easy as possible for people to implement. So, for example, the gut health test. So the microbiome is really important, and it turns out the microbiome is super important in aging. My lab, we published a study a couple of years ago now in Nature Metabolism, one of the big journals, but that basically showed that if you stay healthy over the age of 50, so this basically starts at age 50, if you stay healthy, your microbiome starts looking less and less like anyone else's microbiome. So it becomes more and more unique to you, decade over decade. Now, if you get on a bunch of drugs, it goes away. If you are hospitalized, it goes away. But if you don't, if you stay relatively healthy, your microbiome will be on a trajectory with you, and it will look less and less like anyone else's. And one of the interesting things that came out of that is that when we looked at that as a signal in an elderly population of people over the age of 80, so 80 up to about 100, it turned out that the uniqueness of the microbiome was predictive of how long the person was likely to live after that age. So it was differential.
Wow.
And it segmented really strongly as well on things like, you had a more unique microbiome if you were able to walk fast, average over the age of 80 in this case versus less. If your overall health was rated as excellent as opposed to low or poor, those kind of things. So we saw this signal over and over again. Anyway, coming back to my main point. So biome's important for aging, but one of the problems is that not many people will take a microbiome test comparatively across the whole population. And the reason for that traditionally has been the steps that you have to take. And it's not that big a deal, but it's a big enough deal. And what it is that most of the tests, what you have to do is you have to poop in a bucket or on a piece of paper or something, whatever comes in the kit. And then you've got to take a little scoop. You've got to scoop it up, put it into a vial, close it. Some of the tests require freezing. I imagine listeners probably don't have a sample fridge, so that's going next to your food. Sometimes people don't love that. So there's these barriers to people getting what's super valuable health information. And so what we did at Thorne was we just sat around and thought, well, what's the easiest way we could possibly get a stool sample from somebody? And we came up with this idea that we call the microbiome wipe, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically special toilet paper. It's made out of a polymer. And so what happens if you get the test, then you wipe like you do every day of your life. So there's no real behavior change there. But then you take that, drop it into a vial, tighten it. And then once it's closed tightly, then you can shake it and the wipe will dissolve away in about 10 seconds and release a salt solution into there that will preserve the DNA. And we showed that worked. We published it in the peer-reviewed literature in Frontiers in Immunology last year. And then you send the sample and you get your results. And that will tell you if you have pathogens, so disease-causing bacteria in there. You can monitor probiotics. So if you're taking a probiotic, but you're curious if it's working for you, this will tell you. If you are looking at gut permeability, so-called leaky gut, or you're having problems with digestion, it will tell you whether or not the species of microbiome in the microbiome are making too much ammonia, for example. So if they make too much ammonia, it makes your stomach too basic. And so it's not acidic enough. And so that will cause problems with your digestion. And you can see if your microbiome is causing that, et cetera, et cetera. Going for a long time. There's many, many things that you can learn by looking at a microbiome. And the science just drives new discoveries on that every week, pretty much. You learn something new about the microbiome.
Yeah. No, exactly. So is there is there some reason? I mean, so many of us now, we've gotten used to having to put the little thing into your poop while you, right? And send it back. Not the
And for
poop,
some
the
of
poop
us, we
stick,
just do it.
right?
Yes, of course.
Well, I don't know. The only reason it came to mind is because it was that time of year, the doctor sends it out and
Oh, yeah,
do
right.
it and send it back. Yeah.
Exactly. So we are hopeful that we could use the wipe in a whole bunch of different technologies like that within the medical system, because we just think it's a much easier experience for people. Anecdotally, it was interesting. Sarah Gottfried, I don't know if you know her, but she's a four-time New York Times bestselling author, friend, great doctor, just fabulous. But she was on the Huberman Lab podcast a little while ago, and she shared a story that said that, anyway, she's working with an NBA team, but they would never do the microbiome test. And she was a little frustrated with that, but she switched to Thorne's test once we had the wipe, and shared that, that they were fine with it, that they would that they would do it. And so there'll be a study coming out on that at some point, I believe.
Interesting.
And so it's interesting. So we just try to lower those barriers. We're also working on, we have a device that actually won MedTech's medical device product of the year a couple weeks ago.
Wow.
It's called the OneDraw, which allows for a virtually painless at-home blood measurement, a blood collection. And essentially it's a Lancet device, and it enables you to get about 150 microliters of blood, so a small amount, but enough to make measurements on thousands of metabolites or proteins or a few clinical labs and things of that nature. And so, and we've done this now on tens of thousands of people. It's FDA cleared for supervised draw in the United States. We're hoping for D2C soon, and it's already cleared D2C in a number of other countries around the world. So we've already done it on tens of thousands of people with a 99.9% reported ability for people to get the blood done properly at home. That was published by the University of Cambridge, not us, a big study that they did.
Wow.
And so anyway, that's another example. So we're trying to take a lot of these, got to go into a doctor's office or go into a phlebotomist and turn it into something that you can do virtually painlessly at home on a scale up to 10. The 12,000 people that took the survey rated it between 0 and 1 on a pain scale. So it's very easy. I've done it myself a number of times. Easy to do. And so those are the kind of things we're really focused on, because you can go through and there's lots of good general advice. And as people that listen to your podcast are going to be familiar with on all these kind of things that you should do as you get older.
Right.
But there's also this, we call that sort of general wellness, and this notion of what we call scientific wellness, like that we talk about in the book, for example. You can add a layer onto that now where you're looking at very precise measurements from your own body and identifying, are there things that might not be apparent to you externally that will make a big difference in your health, such as optimizing your gut microbiome, such as optimizing, your blood chemistry, looking for things that develop into problems downstream that you can nudge in important ways early to try to shift a trajectory towards away from disease towards maintenance of wellness.
No, and that makes a lot of sense, because there's so many things that people do and they think, it's not hurting me and this is fine and this food I'm eating or whatever. And, we're all so personal how our bodies are.
It's absolutely true. And I can give a couple of examples. So one that may be familiar is just the notion that, for example, eating fish in general, very good for you. Right? You get high omega-3s, good protein source, all those kind of things. But you might have mercury in the fish. And so if you're monitoring yourself, you would identify. So if you're having tuna sushi, and we had this study that we ran called the Pioneer 100 that we then expanded to about 5,000 people over about 4 years. And we did a massive number of measures. So genome, proteome, metabolite, thousands of measurements on all these people, tracking what happened in health and disease. And we saw that in a number of people where they had really high levels of mercury. So they're on a path to getting, negative effects from mercury poisoning because they were doing things like eating tuna sushi 3 times a week, which they think of as being healthy and good. And on average it is. But tuna sit pretty high up in the food chain, so they accumulate heavy metals from all of the fish that they eat.
And they're so big that they keep it in themselves too.
They're big and they keep it in them. And so it becomes a problem. But if you're monitoring, you'll know that. A more specific example, let's say if you're looking at cardiovascular disease. So a risk factor for cardiovascular disease is a molecule called TMAO. So one of the molecules that turns out to be really important for brain health as you age is phosphatidylcholine. And we can talk more about that, but phosphatidylcholine becomes a rate-limiting nutrient as you're trying to generate as you're trying to generate energy in your brain under low oxygen conditions. And as you get older, your ability to perfuse oxygen in your brain goes down. And so it becomes more acute as you get older. And so if you look in the nutrition literature, for example, people who eat diets rich in phosphatidylcholine, which you can find in eggs or you can supplement or whatever, but people who eat diets rich in phosphatidylcholine get Alzheimer's about 3 years later than those who don't. And so phosphatidylcholine, we would say, is a very important molecule. And we've actually done a huge amount of work on Alzheimer's and different reasons that we believe in that. But if you have the wrong species in your microbiome, they will eat phosphatidylcholine and they will turn it into trimethylamine, which your liver will turn into TMAO. So this is where personalized approaches become really powerful, because if you check your microbiome, then you should take, and I take phosphatidylcholine every day because I think it's going to be good for my brain longevity. But, so you can do that. But I also check my microbiome periodically, because if you get the wrong species in there, it will start eating that and turning it into something that's instead bad for your heart. And so there's all this subtlety that for the most part, we're blind to, right? We never think about it. We don't do it. You say, okay, you do these general things that are healthy and you'll generally come out well. And at a macroscopic level, that's true. But since each of us only have one life, and you don't want to be the exception to the rule. And we all know that person, I'm thinking of, someone close at the moment, that is incredibly active, does everything right in health. The person I'm thinking of actually bikes everywhere, super healthy, food choices, vegan, doesn't own a car so that they literally just get in shape all the time, active, mountains, hiking, has a horrible form of cancer. We didn't know it was coming. And so, there's all these examples where there are these really specific things that we want to be monitoring for or watching to augment our general wellness, but also to try to identify what might be hidden issues that we can alleviate. And the other thing I would say, and just in terms of, thinking about prevention and optimizing your healthy journey through life, is, coming back to Alzheimer's, for example, if you wait until you have cognitive decline, that means a bunch of your neurons have already died. And once your neurons are dying, and once they're dead, nobody knows how to put those back together. And the whole notion that there's going to be a drug that will reverse Alzheimer's disease, no chance, because
don't hold your breath.
Just think about it. What is the chance that there's a mechanism? And I'm not saying you couldn't help, right? You could definitely help.
Stall it maybe, but
maybe, yeah. But there's no chance that giving a small molecule is going to regrow the neurons and synapses that you lost, right? Or at least the brain would have to do something pretty miraculous on its own, right? You'd have to hit something that's pretty hard to imagine. But prevention, which is not allowing those cells to die and keeping them alive, being focused on what happens as you're getting closer to that, is very doable. That's a much, much simpler. It's the story of Humpty Dumpty, right? We all know this since we were 3 years old. Once it's gone, building it back is hard, but keeping it is very doable. And one of the things that people, probably don't think about so much is the energetic needs that your brain has. So your brain consumes 20% of your body's energy, and it's 2% of your body's biomass. So on average, it's 10 times more metabolically active. So that's why if you're working on something really hard, you'll often get the munchies, right? You want to eat. And some of that could be just, nervous things that maybe you want to get rid of. But part of it is that you are consuming a significant amount of energy, right? Your brain's churning along. And as you get older, your ability to perfuse oxygen into your brain through your blood vessels, it gets worse, measurably so. And these have all been done in studies. So we have models of taken from those papers just on how it falls down. It's not evenly distributed into the brain. So what this means is that as you get older, there are certain parts of your brain where it's lower oxygen, or what we'd call hypoxic, but it's lower oxygen, and it gets harder for the brain to keep making enough energy in those hypoxic regions, those lower oxygen regions. And so as that happens, then it gets amplified by problems in cholesterol transports, what ApoE, the big Alzheimer's gene, is involved in. And it turns out that if all you do is look at the lowering of your ability to perfuse oxygen, and then the differences between the cholesterol trafficking of keeping cholesterol and astrocytes low, that ApoE4 is slow at it, which gives you Alzheimer's early. ApoE2 is fast at it, which protects you from Alzheimer's. You can do we've done this, a quantitative simulation of 10 million patients, and that those two facts alone will predict the age of onset of dementia across all the different genotypes. And so we think that's a really fundamental mechanism across, a lot of Alzheimer's disease. And so there's all these things that you can get into. But as soon as you start thinking of Alzheimer's a little more as an energetic issue and not just about amyloid plaques, all of a sudden a bunch of things around prevention make sense. So if you're thinking about exercise, right? Exercise is protective to Alzheimer's and dementia. And so, it won't protect you forever, but makes a difference. And as soon as you start thinking about energetics, it totally makes sense because it keeps the oxygen perfusion in your brain higher. Your slope of decline as you're getting older is lessened. And then there's dietary things. I mentioned phosphatidylcholine. So you can look at, what are the nutrient needs as certain regions of your brain become lower oxygen? When you solve, and this is what my PhD is on, by the way, is modeling metabolism. So, as you build models of the metabolic needs, you can see that they shift as you get into these lower into the state that makes it harder to maintain that energy. So then diet, so that's why so when we ran the simulation, that's when we saw that it predicted that phosphatidylcholine would become rate limiting. So in the simulations, you run out of it when you simulate metabolism. That's when we went into the nutrition literature and said, as just a sanity check, do people that eat phosphatidylcholine get Alzheimer's later? And the answer is, 3 years later. Right. And so we said, okay, well, that comports with what the model was telling us when it said, you're going to become rate limiting to this. And then we're just simulating the biochemistry there. And so as you go through all these things, it just starts to give you some view of actions you can take towards prevention. And you do it by starting from an aspect of studying wellness. So this is what we call scientific wellness, but studying how does the brain stay alive? What are the constraints it has to solve? What does it have to do every day, every second of every day for you to stay, doing with your cognition? And so those are the pieces that I think become so important, because one of the things that drove me nuts for many years was that in the public press, you would always hear, don't go get your genome done because they're going to tell you that you're at high risk for Alzheimer's and there's nothing you can do. And that was repeated thousands and thousands and thousands of times. But that's not true. What is true is that there is no drug to treat Alzheimer's effectively. That is what that meant. But our whole medical system is so geared towards diagnosis, take this drug, diagnose drug, and it's a huge money engine. But we repeat that too often because yes, there is no cure for Alzheimer's, 100%. We don't know how to, like I said, once those neurons are dead, we don't know how to put them back together.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of things you can do to push that off into the future. In fact, we're going to launch a brain health test in the not too distant future from Thorne that will have these digital twin models behind them that will provide a personalized path towards maintaining your brain's health for as long as possible. We're going to try to give people a really personalized view of that based on their own biology, and this really sophisticated model that provides a trajectory of predicted cognition throughout life and how it changes based on different interventions or different things that you might choose to do. So that I'm super.
Wow. And when is that coming out? I need that
as soon as I can possibly do it. We have an awesome demo of it with so we've got it working. We're just productizing it, so it works. We've got the pieces all built. We've spent the last 2.5 years doing it. I'm hoping it's going to be out in 6 months or so, but just
well, I will. Can I get on the mailing list or?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah. I'm not kidding. Well, yeah, no, that sounds incredible. That sounds incredible. Well, I shouldn't say that. That sounds wonderful. Let's put it that way. Not incredible. I'm not trying to question it at all.
Oh no, not at all. And you should. And people listening, when they see it, they should. And we're going to be running tests and trials on it continuously and all those things. And we have been for a while, and comparing it against data. And we'll put this, we'll put all that evidence out for people to evaluate for themselves. But it has really made a huge. And just as a background, I was an NIH-funded Alzheimer's researcher for 10 years before coming into Thorne. And I would say during that period, I just had no clue of the big picture of Alzheimer's disease. We did all kinds of interesting papers and studies, and I'm proud of the work we did, but big picture, I just couldn't see it until we put together this detailed model, trying to model how the brain stayed alive. And as we looked at this from the standpoint of digital twins, and working with a great friend and colleague, Tom Patterson, on this, that we teamed up on this about 2.5 years ago. And it's just totally, with this, I just feel like we now have a fairly comprehensive view and a framework on which to hang lots of different detail and different studies. We use data and insights from about 950 papers that are all indexed under the model. And we've compared it against over 30 human research studies and clinical trials, and it reproduces the data there really well. And did it to gold standard level, we'll have to do some prospective clinical trials with patients and do personalized predictions and show, and so there is still work to be done, and I'm sure we're missing all kinds of pieces. All models are approximations, but I just don't feel like we're flying blind the way I felt like a few years ago. And time will tell. And we'll get this out into the public domain, and have people do it. I have showed it to a lot of experts so far and gotten quite positive responses, but we've done those in bits and pieces. We haven't yet figured out the venue to just release it out into the world, but we'll do that soon.
Okay. Well, that sounds very exciting. For sure.
Very excited about it.
Wow. Well, I guess we should. You have to another appointment, so we should probably wrap up here. And thank you very much for coming on. And I will say that, which I have to say, that neither of us are medical doctors. None of this is medical advice. And if you are having any problems, please go and see your medical doctor and get started to find out what your problem is. So with that, thank you very much. And I will see everybody next week.
This has been Healthy Tips After 50 with Susan Rosen. To stay on the cutting edge of the most effective health strategies, subscribe to this podcast and let us know what you thought of the show with a comment or like on iTunes. Visit healthytipsafter50.com for this episode's show notes, more resources, and free offers.